welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, and my co-host Justin Baker and I here for yet another episode of Overtime Hockey Talk.
Give the people what they want.
Hey, we understand that it has been a whole week. Basically what happened, Justin went and got destroyed via the Visky.
It was delicious.
On the old Bourbon Trail, and I was too lazy to do an episode by myself.
And who could blame you?
I mean...
Without this beautiful face here, why would you?
I don't have any other friends. Not one.
Oh.
Well, definitely not one that I could be like, hey, want to come be on a talk about hockey?
There you go.
I went to the Wings game last night, actually.
Did you?
Wings, Carolina.
You left that one out.
Yeah. And the people that I went with, like, they're like, yeah, I really like hockey, but they like to watch hockey.
Oh.
They don't actually know who anybody is. Like, they're like, oh yeah, I mean that Bertuzzi guy, he's kind of like our enforcer, right? I'm like,
oh, good grief.
I mean, no, not really. Like,
no.
He's just, he's got no tooth in the front, so that definitely makes him look like he's got something going on. But no, not really an enforcer. Although, and then there were 3 scrums last night, like pretty decent scrums for the National Hockey League nowadays. And everyone's like, I can't believe we got to see 3 fights. It was like, no, we didn't see any fights.
Where they just tug at the jerseys.
We saw like 4 roughing penalties. No, they were not fights. They were shaking down or like Larkin laying on top of a guy. That was about what we saw. But it was actually really fun. Get to see the old Geekster down there for Carolina.
Oh, yeah, Geeky, yeah.
Scored his 3rd goal. And Sebastian Aho is just disgusting.
He's so good.
It felt like he did nothing all game, and then he scores a goal nonchalantly, the last goal in the power play.
Yeah,
it was fun to see him live. I don't think I've seen him live before because I don't really
Sebastian Aho?
I don't really make a habit to go to Carolina Hurricanes games live. So,
well, up until maybe last year, they weren't really worth going to.
True. So. And tickets for the Red Wings are very cheap right now.
Oh, very
historically cheap. Like, there were $5 tickets. The only reason we bought the $15 ones was because we had a group of 10 go. So we needed to find some that were like row to row, front and back.
So you didn't do like 5 and 5 in front?
We did like 5 in one row and then 5 or 4 and 6 or something like that. And we had great seats, like second row in the second level. So they were
beautiful,
right at one of the team's blue line. So it was great seats. And then we ended up in the Belfour suite. So
beautiful.
Somebody was with us like, hey, my uncle's in the suite down there. He's the president of something. They're like, okay. And he just got us all guest passes and we went down to the suite and ate brisket.
Gorgeous. And for those who are listening who maybe don't know, the Belfour suite is an actual company and not referring to Eddie Belfour.
True. No, it was Eddie Belfour's suite.
Wait, really?
No, it's the company Belfour.
Like, why would he buy a suite for Detroit?
If your house ever floods, you'll probably know who Belfour is. Okay, well, on today's show, wow, that was like the longest we've ever just bantered.
Opening monologue. Great.
It's a new day. So on today's show, we really just want to take a look at the playoff picture and talk about all the teams that are currently still in the playoff picture and kind of determine where we think they'll end up. If they'll end up in the playoffs, out of the playoffs, and depending on where they finish, what kind of chances they have at making a little run at this. With about 10 games on average, I'd say teams have remaining. Now is the time to really start considering who you're going to play in the first round. I think a lot of these teams, there are several that pretty much it's a lock who they're going to play in the first round, or maybe between 2 teams. So I think we've got some good projections here. So let's start in the Western Conference. We're going to start with the teams far enough away to where it's unlikely they'll make the playoffs, but they still have a shot. At least with Arizona, they're still 4 points out. Other than that, everybody's either tied or 1 point back. So Arizona Coyotes, any hope for the playoffs?
No. Honestly, with 10 games left, they really haven't shown much sign of life. They've lost 2 in a row here, and 5 and 5 the last 10. Honestly, when you look at the teams in front of them, that's what worries me more for Arizona, rather than maybe their lack of scoring that they have right now, because you've got Minnesota who's making a push, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Nashville. All these teams are fighting and showing signs of life, where Arizona just looks like a straight up dud.
Yeah, so if you consider the 3 teams right now that have 78 points, that's Nashville, Vancouver, and Winnipeg. Of course, that could change by the time you're listening to this. They might have a couple more, but in general, what you're looking at, let's say all those teams go 5-5. Let's say all of them include, and then Minnesota also 5-5. So we end up with a bunch of teams with 88 points, which is still very unlikely that all those teams only go 500.
Right.
So that's 88 points. Now Arizona has to win. I'm sorry, they have 13 games left. So if they go 500, it's like 6-6. So they end up with, let's say, like 92 points, just because of you're sure that some of those are probably going to be in overtime. So let's say like 92 points is kind of what the threshold is. Arizona would need to win 9 of their last 12 games to hit 92 points. That's, to me, incredibly unlikely. It's also incredibly unlikely that Nashville, Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Minnesota all go basically 500 the rest of the year.
Right. You're going to need some help. And frankly, they're going to need Darcy Kemper to steal every freaking game.
I mean, they almost need to win. I mean, if they won out, that'd be 98 points. So that would definitely be enough to get them in. But I think probably it's probably more like 94 points is the threshold. Like 94 points in the West will probably get you in.
Yeah, likely. And I mean, you look at the team ahead of them, Minnesota, right? They've gone 7-3 in their last 10. That's pretty miraculous for the team we're looking at. And so you think even if Arizona can do that, that's going to be miraculous as well. But that might not even be good enough at this point. So
right. No, it won't be good enough. Yeah. They're going to have to go at minimum 10-2 the remaining of the way, or 8-2-2, something like that. Which
so fork them and then bye Taylor Hall.
Yep. Minnesota, with just 1 point back, they've got a game. They've got a game in hand on Winnipeg, who they're trailing, but also on Vancouver, the same amount of games played. Minnesota has just been. They kind of came out of nowhere. The trade deadline came, and they for the most part stayed put. Didn't decide to deal any of their real big names other than Jason Zucker, of course. Somehow without Zucker, they continue to score, and they surprisingly, the Minnesota Wild are one of the higher scoring teams in the league. I mean,
that's shocking considering when you look at their leading point getter, who's Kevin Fiala with 54 points, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
they've just done it by committee.
Absolutely. They got a lot of, I mean, Zach Parise is their leading goal scorer with 25 goals. Right, so we look at all these other teams like Edmonton, who's got a 50-goal scorer with Leon Draisaitl and Pasternak up there close to 50, and so on and so forth.
Right, Edmonton has 3 more goals than Minnesota, and they played 1 more game, so it's likely to think they've got about the same amount of production.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So you're getting production from your third and fourth line, where maybe these other top tier teams are relying too heavily on their first 2 lines.
Yeah, it'll be. I still think it'll be very difficult for them to get in, especially the way that they've played on the road. At this point, they've got 7 home games left and 8 road games. 7. I'm sorry. 6 and 7. 6 home games, 7 away. They've 16, 16, and 2 away. That doesn't bode well. I mean, then you basically have to go and sweep at home the way they've been playing on the road. I just look at the teams ahead of them and think it's going to be difficult. Plus, there hasn't been a lot of pressure on this team. All of a sudden, you're in the playoff chase. This is where you find out what a team is made out of, and usually they crumble. Like you tip back down because teams go, "Oh, we need to get up for this game."
Yeah, this is a situation where you got a lot of guys in Minnesota, I think, maybe playing for jobs next season, right? Where you're saying, okay, Bill Guerin, don't trade me in the offseason. I'm worth keeping around. And, let's not forget, a guy named Kevin Fiala has just been on fire. I think since, I can't remember what the stat was, since like January, he's been the hottest goal scorer in the NHL. I mean, and he's only got like 24 goals. It's not even like a crazy amount of goals either. So
it is crazy how the first half of the season, how goal scoring is so much more freewheeling, and then you start to get closer and closer to the playoffs, how everything just squeezes. It's a little tighter, more 1-goal games, lower scoring games. Like teams are not as willing to just freewheel. And I wonder what would happen. And maybe it's a psychological thing, but what would happen if you were able to just keep that all year long? I guess that's the Dallas Stars.
Oh,
right. That's
okay.
So Minnesota actually, I mean, they do have some huge games coming up. Not Minnesota. I'm looking ahead. Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I'm moving ahead.
Let's move ahead.
Okay,
Let's
we're
do it.
moving ahead.
Minnesota's out.
Do you think
as far as I'm
Minnesota's
concerned.
out? Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
So Winnipeg, really, I think we're about to find out here in the next 2 weeks if they're going to make the playoffs. They're going to take on the Oilers, the Flames, the Canucks, and then they have a little Florida that comes to visit. Then they go Minnesota, Dallas, Nashville, Colorado, and they'll play the Flames again.
So they've got a lot of Pacific games, but a
Tons
lot
of
of
important
4-point games, right?
Yes.
When you're playing guys, you're battling for the wild card spot.
I mean, and mainly you're looking. I mean, they're what? They're 2 points back or 1 point back of Calgary. They're going to play them twice more this month. They're going to play Edmonton, Edmonton, they're trailing by a decent amount. I don't expect them to overtake Edmonton, but still a big game within the division. And then you've got Vancouver, who you're tied with. You're going to get to play them in a week. Minnesota, who's just trailing you, you're going to play them. There are some big games coming up for Winnipeg. Essentially, I think we're going to get to March 21st and be able to know, is this Winnipeg team in the playoffs or not?
Yeah, and I still think Winnipeg's got enough left in the tank, even though the teams ahead of them in the wild card, Vancouver, Nashville, right? These teams all have a game in hand. But to me, I look at the play, their forward group, right? To me, when I look at Nashville, Vancouver, maybe they're getting a little bit more balance out of their forward group with Brock Besser being back and Tyler Toffoli playing well, right? But Nashville, maybe not as much, forward scoring as maybe I would have faith in as Winnipeg to do. But when I look at the back end, right, I look at what Winnipeg has in net. Hellebuck has been fantastic this season. To me, he might be my Vezina front runner between him and Tuukka Rask.
He's been your Vezina front runner for
like 3 years.
Since he was 5 years old.
Yeah, I know. But he's going to win one, damn
Those
it.
pictures of him when he was 5 are weird.
Yeah, let's not talk about that. But I like Winnipeg to kind of beat out some of these other teams here, especially maybe Vancouver, in my opinion.
It would be pretty tragic as a Canucks fan for them to be where they were like
first
2 months
place
ago
in the division
to go and miss the playoffs after such an explosive year from Quentin Hughes and another great year from Elias Pettersson. Brock Besser still can't stay healthy all year long, but they really miss him when he's gone.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say, Jacob Markstrom's got to be licking his chops at this free fall without him, because he's like, oh man, Vancouver's going to pay me more money now because of how valuable I was to this team.
Yeah,
they were in first place when he was there, and then started slipping when he fell out. I mean, no, not knock on Demko. He's been playing okay, but like he's not playing at Markstrom's level of quality starts. And I think when you look at the goaltending, when you look at the forward group, I think I'm a little bit more confident in saying that Winnipeg would make a wild card spot.
Markstrom's got some comparisons to Devin Dubnyk in Edmonton, where he was so highly touted in Edmonton. Dubnyk was.
Yep.
He played. He wasn't great. And finally, Edmonton goes, forget this. Like, we're done. We're trading you. They trade him, and then all of a sudden, it was, wait, what did we just do? And Edmonton's been looking for a goalie ever since. And they thought Cam Talbot was the answer. He was for about 60 games,
season.
Vancouver held on to Jacob Markstrom. And I won't say that he's Dubnyk, a guy who was like a Vezina candidate at some points.
It's not his net right now in Minnesota. That's
definitely has. Well, Dubnyk is, this is.
Well, no, I mean,
he's kind of come in age, but Markstrom and hanging on to him and staying with him has really paid off for Vancouver. And I think ultimately he'll re-sign in Vancouver. I mean, goalies just don't get the same kind of payday that other players do.
No, and I think when you look around the league too, I think especially this offseason, given what happened with Bobrovsky taking that big paycheck and now just bombing,
faltering,
it's like teams are going to be scared off, from paying guys top dollar. So he'll be
at
best
least
to
for
stay
more than a season or two,
right? So he'll be best to hang out in Vancouver for sure. But
okay, well, I guess
segue.
We've got Vancouver, Winnipeg, Nashville all tied with 78 points. Out of those three teams, who is the, or maybe you think Minnesota squeaks in. Didn't sound like it though. Out of those three teams, which one do you have going?
Well, I definitely like Winnipeg making the wild card. Again, I like what they have up front in their forward group. I think it can catch fire at any given point and just be completely dangerous when they can roll 2 or 3 lines. I think the other night too, Cody Eakin finally got his first goal as Winnipeg Jet, which was great.
There you go.
So I think with that said, Winnipeg would be my lock out of those three to go. However, I'm starting to get a little worried about the teams ahead of them, maybe in the standings, and we'll get to them in a minute. But if I had to pick a second one, maybe Nashville, right behind. Because again, I Winnipeg, beginning of the season, I don't think anybody really picked them to make the playoffs. I thought we all thought they were going to be a bubble team, and they're exactly where we thought they were, right on the cusp. And
they just struggled so much early on that's what's killed them.
Sure.
Like, ultimately, if they had played the way that they've been playing since January, they would probably be securely in a playoff spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, either way, you still look at this as a great leap forward. So next year, right, you've got all these players coming back with your, hopefully you can get some of these, free agents re-signed, but you basically bring back the same group of people.
Well,
and now you can make strides.
And you actually have money under the cap with Dustin Byfuglien being he'll be gone and off.
Well, no, we're talking about Vancouver here, but Winnipeg, Vancouver, that's another story too. Yeah, so his cap money off the book too. That's going to help Winnipeg, but maybe they go out and make a play for Alex Pietrangelo, but we'll see.
Okay, so you're going Nashville, Winnipeg.
Yeah, if I had to pick a couple wild cards teams, that would be me.
I'll say I'm just going to say who I'm rooting for.
Okay,
I am rooting for a Vancouver and Winnipeg to make the playoffs.
Now,
I just think it's better when those teams are in the playoffs. And Vancouver hasn't been in the playoffs in a while. Winnipeg, I think, has something to prove. I'd like, if I'm, you're either looking at probably St. Louis or Vegas would play one of those two teams. And I think out of those three teams, Winnipeg's probably the team you don't want to play.
Oh, absolutely.
You know that they have the playoff experience. They've got those guys, like, you have a guy like Scheifele, really Blake Wheeler. Like, you've got some leaders in the locker room that come playoff time are going to be extra special, and you know it. Whereas with Vancouver, you definitely look at them. I kind of see New Jersey 2 years ago squeaking into the playoffs, kind of like making this awesome run. Granted, I think they have more high-end talent, although New Jersey had Taylor Hall. So pretty similar, though. Like some veterans, a mix of veterans and younger players. They squeak into the playoffs, but ultimately you run up against such a good team. You have no playoff experience. You maybe win a game or two, but there's no danger of you winning.
No, and that's great for Vancouver too, right? You get in even if you lose a series, only winning one or two games, you still get that experience, which is great for your growth and development. However, I will say, to kind of add to your point, Vancouver would be a great team to see in there over a team like Nashville, because I love the flashiness of like Elias Pettersson and Tyler Toffoli. That would just be fun to watch. And
are we kind of bored on Nashville now?
I'm getting bored on Nashville because
they can't score.
Well, yeah, they can't score. Philip Forsberg disappoints me every year in the sense that he's not like, I'm waiting for him to bust out like a 90, 100-point season, and Duchesne's look, below average this year, and same with Johansson. So, again, you've got guys that are just been subpar for Nashville, but they've been getting it done by committee and, good goaltending. So we'll see what they can do down the stretch. Maybe they catch fire and prove me wrong.
Yeah. The only other team I think that's currently in a divisional playoff position, meaning the top three in their division, that has any risk of falling would be Calgary.
Right. The team I picked last show for a potential fallout, right?
A team that has really struggled to score, only 210 goals so far this year.
Yeah, Monahan, Goudreau, these guys all look, like they were 2 years ago, right? They definitely aren't those point-per-game guys they were last year, where everybody had those career years, like you've mentioned that many of times. And, Mike Smith he's been fine.
Well,
I'm sorry, Cam Talbot has been fine.
He's like, not there anymore.
Right. Mike, I almost said it again. Cam Talbot has been fine. He hasn't been like, I don't think he's been the guy to challenge David Riddick yet. And David Riddick certainly hasn't been a guy who's, he's been given every opportunity. They want him so badly to be their number one, but he just hasn't grabbed it and ran with it yet. And I think, when you look at his numbers, right, I think he's got just above a 900 save percentage, almost a 3 goals against average. And, with what they have on the back end there in Calgary and, the firepower they should have up front, it's just not getting it done.
Yeah, it's not so concerning that they're letting in goals, because I just think that's generally how it's been. Like, they've been a little porous defensively because their defenders are so offensively minded, which is fine when they're scoring. But when you're basically, other than the Dallas Stars, the lowest scoring team in the playoffs right now, you're probably in trouble. So that's
we saw that with the Islanders last year, right? They couldn't score goals, and it didn't really work out too well for them.
They are 6-3-1 in their last 10, so they've been playing well enough to where they probably won't fall out here. They have to get jumped by 3 teams, which is unlikely.
Right. I think even if they go 500 down the stretch, they can still squeak in, which will be okay. And I think,
500 would get them 60 or 91 points if they were 500.
Okay.
It's crazy though. It is very possible that somebody in the West could end up with like 90 points and make the playoffs somehow. Like maybe 90. I still think 94 is your sweet spot, but maybe it ends up being 92 points. I don't know the last time a team made the playoffs with 92 points.
That's a good question.
I'll have to look that up. The Edmonton Oilers, team that has, I think that they've surprised us, but at the same time, this is what we've expected them to be able to do with such high-end talent that it was like, this team should be in the playoffs just based off Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and that's that. As long as they can get average goaltending, which they finally have been. Mike Smith, actually on the Edmonton Oilers, he has been fine.
He's been good.
He's been good enough.
Good enough.
And that's kind of that. The Oilers, to me, are going to be a team to watch come playoff time, just because you really don't I don't think that there's any team in the league that you would say, nope, no chance. They're going to roll over Edmonton. Edmonton doesn't stand a chance. It's Connor McDavid. You don't know what's going to happen. So I think they maybe are the most intriguing team in the West because they could win the West. Yeah. They could surprise everyone and win the West. But at the same time, they could get swept in the first round, and I still wouldn't be surprised. Either way, I wouldn't be surprised.
I get it because, like you said, when you have Draisaitl and McDavid out there, you never know what could happen, right? But at the same time, on the flip side, it could end up happening where you have to depend so much on your depth scoring. And right now, let's face it, Andre Anthony Seo's looked pedestrian. Tyler Ennis has been okay.
Their moves, other than that one game where Ennis looked amazing, like the very first game.
Right. They both look great, but then they've kind of come back down to earth, and they're kind of the players they have been all season. So, the big question is, I would think at this point, they might go with Koskinen in the playoffs, but you kind of have questions in goal, right? So they make the playoffs. Koskinen unproven in the playoffs. You haven't really seen what he can do. Mike Smith, the more reliable veteran guy who actually looked pretty good for Calgary last time in the playoffs. So maybe they go to him. I don't know, but
I do think there is a chance that Edmonton makes a run at the division title, though.
Oh, I absolutely agree. They could.
Vegas has been playing well enough. They are 8-2 in their last 10. They've been on
You're
fire.
Only 3 points out.
3 points out with a game in hand, and they also play each other. So obviously, that game where they play each other is pinnacle. That's March 31st, second and last game of the season. If Edmonton can go into Vegas and win that game, then they've set themselves up to be able to win that division, especially because they get to play Anaheim twice, they play San Jose, and they play the Ottawa Senators. There's 4 games through the rest of your schedule that should be no-brainer wins.
Right. You
tell that to the Maple Leafs.
Right. Well, let's talk about LA, right? You should be beating them, but LA's just beating up everybody right now. Don't know why.
Insane.
Regardless, though, to your point, I do think, Edmonton's got a favorable schedule down the stretch where they can at least secure home ice for the first round, which is what you want if you're Edmonton.
I think probably in terms of 1 and 2 in this division that it's going to stay the way that it is.
I would agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, the Central Division. Not really. I'd say that as far as these 3 teams go, it's going to be these 3 teams when all is said and done in the tops of the Central Division. I don't see Nashville catching them. I think that's very unlikely, and I also don't see Winnipeg catching any of these teams. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, all right. Well, Dallas has locked up the 3 slot. I think that even though they're on a 3-game losing streak, I think they're going to find their way here through the last 10, 12 games, 13 games, and they'll find their way in here. It's a matter of Colorado and St. Louis. Who takes that division crown? Who pulls Dallas in the first round? And who is likely the team that gets to play maybe Vancouver, maybe Winnipeg, maybe Nashville?
Yeah, I do think I would have to disagree. I do think Dallas is in some danger, right? You look at the way they played over the last 10. Again, talking about the 3 losses in a row, I haven't been very impressed with them lately. They just can't seem to score some goals. I mean, Rupe Hintz, you talk about that last game where he scored that 4-1 goal after, being down in the third period there 4-0. And he looked like that was his first goal of the season. I mean, that's just how strapped for goals this team is, I think. And so I think unless they can kind of figure out how to score a few more goals, they could potentially slip to a team like Winnipeg, who, in my opinion, is going to make a good run at this and maybe could challenge them for the 3 spot. But regardless, I do think Dallas ultimately figures out how to stay afloat and gets in the playoffs. But whether or not they stay in the wild card or 3 is a different story. But when you talk about the 2 teams at the top, Colorado and St. Louis, I think St. Louis is just feeling blessed right now because McKinnon, I'm hearing, is out for 1 to 2 weeks.
Out for a week or 2, yeah.
And you look at the injuries this team has, right? Granted, I keep hearing that guys are skating, guys maybe coming back.
Is out. And
Kadri, Rantanen, Colin Wilson, Culvert.
They are going to be interesting when they get everyone back.
Right, that's the thing. So when they get healthy come playoff time, great. It's going to be, it's going to be look out. Colorado could make some real noise. But, when you talk about finishing in the division here, I think St. Louis is probably going to lock that up. They've been playing well their last 10. And, Colorado's been playing pretty good too, even with the injuries. But ultimately, I do think, McKinnon, who is, in my opinion, a top 3 Hart Trophy candidate right now, is probably going to be very missed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think he's probably your Hart Trophy winner. I mean, he has what, like 80, 85 points, something like that. He's got by far the most points on that team, 91 or something.
Absolutely.
The next highest, I think, is Makar, and he's got 45 points. Like no one's
it's
close
like Taylor
to him.
Hall a couple years ago,
Yes,
right?
he's done it.
Yeah,
he's done it by
93
himself.
and then 47 points.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Huge gap. I mean, Rantanen probably would be up there,
Right.
but he's been
and so would
injured all
Landis
year.
Cog.
Yeah,
they both been hurt. I'll backtrack to Dallas and say the reason I think they are going to remain in that 3 spot. They play San Jose, Arizona, LA twice, Chicago, Anaheim, and then I think San Jose one more time. So you've got some games against some bad teams, and Dallas has at least played those teams well for the most part. So
good for them.
LA might go and beat everybody here through the end, and
luckily they got to play Winnipeg and Vancouver at home, so that could maybe work out in their advantage. But
there you go. Yeah,
we'll see.
Okay, so you're 1, 2, 3 in the Central.
Yeah,
prediction at this point with 13 games left to go.
Yeah, I think St. Louis, Colorado, and then I would say Dallas right now, but. Who knows?
No, it sounds like you don't want them there.
I kind of want Winnipeg to get up there because I would love to see Colorado and Winnipeg in that first round. I think that would be fantastic. And Dallas, again, they're gonna try to play that 2-1, 1-0 kind of hockey come playoff time. And Colorado's not about that. They're about fast. Let's score a lot of goals. And
yeah, wouldn't it be fun to see the total offensive minded team? Although, I mean, it's not like Colorado's letting in a ton of goals or anything.
No, they've been getting good goaltending, absolutely. But I think it would be a lot more fun to watch Winnipeg and Colorado try to outscore each other, and then also have a couple decent, goaltenders back there. So it would be fun. Yeah.
All right. There's our Western Conference. For the record, I'm going St. Louis, Colorado, Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's go Eastern Conference, and in the Eastern Conference, I think we'll make the cutoff. The Florida Panthers, Montreal, Buffalo, despite acquiring the great Wayne Simmons at the trade deadline, it really
that hurts.
Hasn't helped them much as they are 3-7 in their last 10. At this point, the Florida Panthers still hanging on by a thread. They are 3 points back in the Maple Leafs with a game in hand. They're also 3 points back of the Columbus Blue Jackets with a game in hand. So it is possible for the Florida Panthers to make the playoffs. They are going to have to jump. I mean, really, they only have to jump one team because the Leafs are ripe for the picking. But also, if they want to get a wild card, they have to jump 3 teams. So they have 2 paths to the playoffs. How do you see this playing out for the Florida Panthers?
I don't see it playing out well at all for them, to be quite honest. I mean, you're starting to see them miss, Vincent Trocheck, even though he wasn't producing at his 40-goal pace. But, that depth scoring is has been okay. They've gotten guys like Brett Connolly and Nola Chari producing, but that second and top line, Barkov and Huberdeau have been relatively quiet as of late, and this is why they slip. And then if you look at the back end, Bobrovsky's been, terrible this year, and they don't have anybody behind him really that can hold down the fort when he was playing pretty bad. I mean, Bobrovsky's finally up to a .900 save percentage for the season.
Hey!
Right. Tip of the cap to that man, but that's not going to do it, right? And you got to think with all the, the wheeling and dealing and the money they spent on a goaltender like that, I would just look, and especially when you look at the team right in front of them, the New York Rangers, I think what they're doing,
well, this is
going to make it look pretty bad.
This is my issue with the Florida Panthers, is that every time they've had the opportunity to either separate themselves, usually from the Maple Leafs, but other wildcard teams, or put themselves back into a position where they might have an opportunity to get into a wildcard spot, they lose that game. So let's look at their upcoming schedule this month. I mean, first off, they're taking on the Dallas Stars on Thursday this week on the 12th. So that's going to be a tough game for the Panthers to beat the Dallas Stars.
Especially when they're not scoring goals, right? Dallas is keeping them out of the net.
Yep. New Jersey, Detroit is their next two. So 2 should win games. And you know what? They probably will. They'll probably win those games. Then you got to take on Winnipeg, who's fighting for their life. Then you get your nice Buffalo Sabres game. So that should be a cakewalk.
Should be.
Then you're going to take on St. Louis. And then the 23rd pretty much is going to be your season rides on this game. They play the Maple Leafs.
Absolutely. That's a make it or break it game, because I think at that point...
In Toronto.
Only being a few points behind Toronto right now, and I think, with some winnable games, they could be right there, just within an arm's reach of Toronto, right? And then Toronto, in my opinion, is probably, because they got to go to Toronto, and Toronto's playing pretty good right now. I don't think it's going to go so well for Florida.
Yeah, and Toronto just got Morgan Riley back last night.
And they look pretty good with him.
They were able to beat Tampa Bay again. They just seem to play well against, the Leafs. They can't beat LA, they can't beat Anaheim, they can't beat San Jose, but they could beat Tampa Bay. They could beat Tampa Bay. Also, last few games of the season for the Panthers, they're going to have to play Boston, then a Rangers team on the 30th of March, which at that point, it's likely that's a pretty big game for both those teams.
Right.
You get a freebie against Ottawa on the 2nd, and then you have to play the Washington Capitals in your last game of the year.
Yeah, and I honestly think a team like Ottawa, they're looking to play spoiler, right?
Sure.
They want to go out there and say,
not?
screw you guys.
Why not? I will say, the Florida Panthers, they do have what I would call it's a favorable schedule. You can't beat getting to play Ottawa twice, Buffalo, New Jersey, Detroit. Detroit is as free of a win as you can get right now. Even though Detroit beats Tampa Bay.
I don't know how.
But I mean, when you compare the Panthers schedule to the Leafs schedule, I look at the Leafs schedule. They play Nashville, Boston, the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, the Lightning, the Hurricanes, the Capitals, and then they, of course, they get the freebie against the Wings and then the Montreal Canadiens. But they have to play a lot of tough teams down the stretch.
Yeah.
So that could be where there's enough room for the Panthers to squeak in. But it's all going to come down to that 23rd.
It's a 4-point game, right? You create that gap big enough, and you could see Florida slip.
The Leafs seem to be getting guys back. And that bodes well.
They're getting their mojo back.
When you're getting your defenseman back.
Yeah.
That's huge. They were, for a while, playing a bunch of Marlies. So, okay, we've spent a ton of time on the Florida Panthers. Let's move to the New York Rangers, who have the same amount of points as the Florida Panthers. They have no shot at catching the Penguins in the Metropolitan top 3. They are wild card or bust. They've got a game in hand on Columbus and Carolina has a game in hand on them, but they trail them all by 3 points. Any chance that this New York Rangers team comes out of nowhere and makes the playoffs?
Yep. I want them in. I want them in that last wild card spot. I think they're going to jump the Islanders. I think they're going to jump Columbus, and they're going to catch. They're on fire right now. I love watching them play, and I'll tell you what. Whether or not it's Shesterkin or even the King Henrik Lundqvist gets to play in the playoffs, they're going to have some fun guys to watch in that net. And then you look at what's up front. Capo Kakko, he's starting to get his groove back a little bit here, which will be great for the Rangers fans. But Zibanejad's been just a huge story for this team. He's looked just insanely good.
Yes.
Pretty much just bought me a first-round bye in my fantasy playoffs. I picked him up halfway. Well, didn't pick him up, but got him halfway through the season, and he just ran with it. And you look at the teams they would just be so much fun to watch in the playoffs. I think kind of like Vancouver, right, where they have exciting players. Panarin, right, Zibanejad. We talked about it, and they've got some exciting guys on the back end like Adam Fox, and so again. They would just be fun to have in there, fun to watch, and it would be great for their fans, much like Vancouver, where maybe they weren't expected to get in, but if they do and they go out in the first round, it's still a win-win because they get that experience for a lot of those younger guys.
Sure. I'll tell you they're not going to make the playoffs.
Okay.
And the reason is Colorado, Arizona, Calgary, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Washington, Tampa Bay, Florida, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. Some of the games that they have to play through.
No, I will agree. My brain does say that's going to be very tough for them.
They have a couple, relative freebies. They get to play Buffalo. They get to play Chicago in their final game of the season. But there are some hard games, and it's not just that those teams are good teams. Like you have to play Pittsburgh 3 times the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
These are teams that are all fighting for position. Like the Washington Capitals chance and the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, you're playing all 3 of these teams that are ahead of you in the division. It's going to be hard. If they make the playoffs, it truly is. I would say probably even bigger of a turnaround than the St. Louis story last year. I know that the Rangers weren't in last place.
Interesting,
but this Rangers team really they weren't anywhere. They weren't going to do anything. And they would have turned it around, and then to go and win the games necessary down the stretch to make the playoffs and overcome. I mean, they're gonna have to overcome the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, the Hurricanes. Like it's not going to be easy down the stretch.
Yeah, it'll be fun to watch, but again, my heart wants the Rangers in there.
That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. They definitely are more fun to watch than, no offense, the New York Islanders, who have 2 games in hand. I think probably more likely to make the playoffs than the Blue Jackets, but still lots of games left to play. The Islanders, can they make the playoffs?
Yeah, I'm going to say no. Honestly, I do think they fall out. I just ultimately think they're kind of like Florida, right, where they've had some opportunities. You look at their last few games when they played Ottawa, they played Montreal. They got beat by both these teams where it should have been relatively easy wins for them, or should have been victories, right? This is a team that's supposed to be, keeping games very low scoring, and they give up 6 goals to Montreal, right? They lose to, Boston 4-0, which was expected. They get a point at least out of St. Louis, and a point out of, playing the Rangers, but they've had these opportunities, I think, lately to grab a lot more points, and they haven't done it. And they have trouble scoring. So we'll see, but ultimately, luckily for them, they do have Barry Trotz behind the bench, and I think that does bode well for a team that maybe starts to struggle down the stretch because he knows how to rally guys. He knows how to, work guys around to get the most out of them, and so maybe that works out for him and they get in, but I don't know. I'm starting to lose the faith a little bit.
Okay. All right. Yeah, all right. So you also have Columbus, who's just ahead of them. To me, very similar position as the Islanders. Can't score a goal. They both have great coaches who have coached up the team that they have in front of them.
Yeah, and I very well could say if Columbus gets in, you could give Tortorella the Jack Adams right now. In my opinion, I think he would be right up there with your 1 or 2 vote,
and then he'll get fired next year. That's always what happens to them. Okay, I guess in terms of the wild card, who do you think's getting in? Because the only team we haven't talked about yet is the Carolina Hurricanes. To me, they're just too good to miss.
Yeah,
I think they've got too much depth, and even going 5-4-1, you add a guy like Trocheck to your top 6. You had Brady Shea, who played a ton. He's been playing a ton of minutes. He's obviously getting adjusted to their system as well. And then adding in Vatanen too. This team really saw a facelift at the deadline. I'm okay with going, yeah, they need 10 games to kind of figure this out. And a game against Detroit is a great place to do it.
Yeah, it was a great start. I mean, you look at, Justin Williams, right? their quote unquote leader in that locker room. He's scored in 5 straight games. He's starting to get his mojo back, right? And much like Rob Bendermore behind the bench, once he gets his mojo going too, these guys all seem to follow suit.
Yep.
They got Mrazek back last night, right, to play Detroit, and that was a good game for him to come back to because he didn't have to worry about being shelled maybe against the Tampa or Boston team that could put up 5 or 6 on him. And so you kind of get a little confidence back, like first game back, right? Get the rust off. And so actually having a quality goaltender behind you now, the guys in Carolina can say, great, we don't have to worry about giving up the odd man rush going the other way because, let's face it, Anton Forsberg wasn't getting it done. No. So that only bodes well for them. And then, maybe they get James Reimer back before the playoffs. I'm not sure what his status is, but either way, it's all golden for them, and they're in my opinion.
Yeah, that second wild card spot, you're picking the Rangers.
I want the Rangers in there. I just do. I mean, it's a coin flip at this point between them and the Islanders, but I would love to just see the Rangers in there.
Yeah, I just have a hard. I just don't think that the Rangers' schedule bodes well for them. Really, neither does the Islanders. I think that when you look down the stretch, as much as it's not that I don't have anything against the Blue Jackets or the fan that listens to our podcast from them. I actually have no idea how many there.
Love how you just say fan. You don't think that we have multiple people in Columbus.
Yeah, right. I mean, Columbus and the Rangers and the Islanders, they're all going to play each other down the stretch here. I would agree that I'd love to see the Rangers in. I would also really like to see the Florida Panthers make the playoffs in a wild card spot. Not to take it over, away from my team, the Leafs, but I wouldn't mind seeing them somehow find their way into the wild card. Oh man, this one is just so tight right now. Although I'm looking at it and saying the Rangers are 3 points back, and that puts them at a big disadvantage. 3 points are hard to make up. We've seen it before, how it seems like you're only 3 points back, and you're forever 3 points back.
I know.
I think it's Carolina, and I think it's ultimately the New York Islanders squeak in. I think Barry Trotz has enough and a ton of veteran leadership in that room to where it's ultimately the Islanders. But there are some big games coming up, so we'll see what happens there. But that would be my pick. Let's go Atlantic Division.
Why not? Let's talk about your Leafs.
Okay, the Leafs obviously not catching anyone ahead of them, being 11 points back from the Lightning.
No way.
And getting everyone back, getting Morgan Riley, getting just everybody that has been hurt here over the last little while. I think that they're pretty secure where they are. And ultimately, they're going to play the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 1. I think
that's going to be a fun match.
It's the one, I'm pretty darn sure. Okay, I wouldn't put my life on it or anything, but it's going to be an amazing first round.
Absolutely. That's a 7-game series to me.
What man. And it's just the travesty of the way that they do the divisions. You just kind of don't want to see those two teams go at it. Although I think there is an argument to be made that Toronto really isn't that great. They'll be fun, but they'll probably will they beat Tampa Bay in the playoffs? I think it's unlikely. Of course, I'll be rooting for it, but
they've got enough talent up front, and they have a goaltender who can get hot, and I think could potentially steal a series.
If Anderson is hot, there's no telling what the Leafs can do.
Absolutely.
If he's not, it'll be a 6-game.
It'll be Jack Campbell in Game 4, and we'll see what happens.
Oh gosh. I mean, the Atlantic Division's kind of this it's been what it is. Boston's been ahead for forever, and Tampa Bay almost came back and caught them, and then Boston caught heat again, and Tampa has struggled and gone 3-6-1 in their last 10.
Stamkos leaves, and they start to bomb a little bit.
I wonder if there's been a team that has won a division but not won in a shootout that year. Boston's 0-7 in the shootout.
That's true.
It's a good question. We'll have our statistician dig that up.
Yeah, luckily for them, they don't have to worry about that in the playoffs.
I think we'll skip past the Atlantic, assuming that those 3 teams are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, everybody knows what they are and who they are. It's been that way all year.
I think the Metro is. I mean, the Philadelphia Flyers have come out of nowhere. They're 9-1 in their last 10, but more importantly, 25-6-4 at home. They've been unbelievable.
Carter Hart has only lost twice at home.
Crazy. He may be your Vezina Trophy winner.
You could give him a tip of the cap, a nod.
Based on just like, it's almost like he's been an MVP in a way. Like maybe not the best goalie in the league, but he's been so important to that team. But Philadelphia, do they overtake the Washington Capitals for that top spot in the Metro?
Boy, that's really tough. Like, that's really tough to say.
Washington hasn't been playing firing on all cylinders, which is typical for them down the stretch. That they know that this is just the
whatever. This is the appetizer.
Whatever.
We're going to get in the playoffs and we're going to go full ham on everybody. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, luckily for Philadelphia, they do have to play some relatively easy teams a couple times. I mean, they've got Buffalo, Detroit, New Jersey, so that bodes well for them. But they've also got to play, a few playoff teams here that, So I don't know. Boy, that's a really tough question. I honestly would think, I'm just going to say, I think Philadelphia is going to ride this hot streak, and I think they're going to overtake Washington. Although it's going to come down to like the last game or two of the season. But I think, honestly, maybe they take first place in the Metro.
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't play each other the rest of the year. They already had their final game about exactly a week ago. The Flyers won that one.
Yeah, and I know people are going to be a little pissed off because a lot of people do want to see that Pittsburgh-Philadelphia first-round matchup. But the consolation prize of Washington-Pittsburgh first round is not so bad. And then you get potentially...
It would be the first time they ever meet in the first round.
That's very true, yeah.
At least this iteration of these two teams. I don't know if they in the 80s or 90s or something. Well, definitely not in the 80s. We all know that the Penguins didn't make the playoffs in the 80s.
Heyo.
Yeah, I think I look at this, and Washington has had several times over the last few years, same with Pittsburgh, where there was it appeared that the two of them would play each other in the first round. And whichever team could pull away said, we're not playing them in the first round. And they just rip off.
We want no part of this.
They go on a tear. And, that really is the key. That's the ticket. It's Washington. Do you want a rematch of the Carolina Hurricanes, or do you want to play the Pittsburgh Penguins in round one? A team that you've beat once out of like 5 tries. Or do you go Carolina, who actually destroyed you, beat you in Game 7. A team, though, that I think Washington could beat. I do think that Washington would be favorites against Pittsburgh as well. But
yeah, I think if you're Philadelphia, right, you look at this, I don't want to say you're maybe looking ahead to round 2, but by winning the division, right, you get to avoid, playing Pittsburgh in the first round. But then also you get to look ahead to that second round, and you could say, okay, if we have to play Washington or Pittsburgh, whomever in the second round, we get to basically, we're going to play a team that is beaten to crap because those teams are going to play hard against each other. And so maybe that makes it a little bit easier for you, because if you do have to play a team like Carolina or a team like the Islanders in the first round, it's not going to be as physically hard, with both those teams. Yes, you're going to have maybe some high-scoring games if you've got to play Carolina.
But every Carolina Hurricanes and New York Islanders fan, it's not going to be that hard playing you bitches over there. It's easy.
Physically. Now, I do think Carolina, though, if they do play Philadelphia in the first round, Carolina could make a really good play at that. And I think they do have a nice shot. I would probably pick them to win.
I don't think I'd want to play Carolina in the first round.
No, I don't. I wouldn't want to either.
When it comes to the Flyers, I think home ice advantage is paramount in order to go on a long run.
Absolutely.
You look at they've lost 6 games in regulation at home. The only team with fewer losses at home in regulation, the Boston Bruins, with 4. But I think that overall Philadelphia have the most home wins at 25, and they have another 6 games. 6 of their last 13 games are at home, so they could win 30 games at home. And if they can get home ice advantage, it's clear that it is truly an advantage for this team, which I think does speak to maybe a younger goalie being more comfortable in your home arena, because they're only 16, 15, and 3 on the road. Really, if you go just pure win-loss, they're 16 and 18 on the road.
Yeah, I'd like to see Carter Hart's save percentages and quality starts on the road versus at home. I wish there was a stat somewhere I could pull that up. But
well, there is, but we're not going to take the time to look it up. Okay, ultimately, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'm going to go Philly, Washington, Pittsburgh.
Okay, that would be a beauty first round. as we move forward here with 12, 13, 11 games left in the season, we'll of course keep abreast to everything there is to know about the standings. I think that as we move into the playoffs, that we should start doing some deep dives on these teams. So
I like it.
We will we'll grab a couple teams, do a big deep dive, and we'll continue being with you as we figure out who's going to make the playoffs here. And just, what is it, like 21, no, maybe it's like 28 days until the playoffs, something like that.
Yeah, hopefully they let fans in for those too. But
gosh, what if? That would be horrible. Go away, coronavirus. Don't do it. It doesn't sound like San Jose is going to have any fans at their games.
no, did you hear what Riley Smith said?
No?
Oh my gosh, it was hilarious. So I guess Florida's doing the same thing where like they only non-essential or non-essential personnel are not allowed in the stadium. You know, they're going to basically have no fans in the stands. And so they were asking him, what it's like. And he's like, oh, well, I played in Florida for so long. I know what it's like to not play in front of any fans. So
Oh my.
he just like ripped them apart.
Wow. Nice. I love it. Well, on that note, to the Florida Panther fan, the Columbus Blue Jacket fan, we love you. Keep listening. Bring more of your friends to the show. And you can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. And we will talk to you very soon. Enjoy your week.